On our 7th wedding anniversary, I found the returned department store bill in the mailbox. The bill showed that Mark had used our joint account last week to buy a Van Cleef and Arpels necklace worth $4,000. The only thing around my neck right now was a cheap Amazon silver chain. He had put it on me himself last night. Staring at the unfamiliar delivery address on the necklace receipt, I crumpled the paper into a ball. I walked to the kitchen trash can, yanked the cheap silver chain off my neck, and tossed it into the coffee grounds dripping with black water. I turned the faucet on full blast, letting the cold water wash over my hands. After washing up, I smoothed out the department store bill, folded it into a neat little square, and tucked it into the pocket of my jeans. That's when Mark came down from the second floor. He was wearing his gray pullover hoodie, holding a freshly mixed protein shake, the stainless steel mixing ball clinking inside the cup. "Good morning, honey." He walked over and habitually leaned in to kiss my forehead. I took a big step back, grabbed a rag, and started scrubbing the countertop vigorously. "Any packages for me in the mailbox?" He took a sip of his protein shake, his eyes glued to his phone screen. I kept scrubbing the marble countertop, the rag making a harsh scraping sound. "Just a few grocery store flyers." I tossed the rag into the sink, splashing water everywhere. He nodded and headed toward the garage with his cup. "There's an emergency meeting at the company tonight. I'll be home late. Just have dinner yourself." The garage door slowly closed. The sound of the engine faded away. I pulled the bill out of my pocket and smoothed it out on the dining table. The name on it was Kelly, with an address in a high-end apartment downtown. Making a scene wouldn't do me any good. Half of this 4-bedroom house was in his name. I needed to make him spit out everything he'd swallowed. I opened my laptop and connected to the home Wi-Fi. For $12, I registered a brand new domain name. In an hour, I built a simple law firm website called Barnes & Associates. Then I applied for a virtual office phone number, linked to the old phone I usually used for online shopping. I typed out a title in the document, Notice of Inheritance. The letter said that my distant great-aunt living in Texas had passed away from illness, leaving behind a $5 million trust fund, and that I, as the sole legal heir, would take full control of the money. To make the letter look flawless, I deliberately drove to a print shop 3 blocks away and chose a thick, textured, cream-colored paper to print the document. Back home, I dug out an old file folder from the bottom of a drawer, removed the red wax seal from it, and carefully glued it onto the envelope flap. At 4 in the afternoon, I casually tossed the forged letter on the shoe cabinet in the entryway. One corner of the envelope was just pressing down on my car keys. At 5:30, I heard the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway. Mark pushed open the door, kicking off his shoes and dropping his briefcase on the floor. I was sitting on the living room carpet, rolling up clean towels one by one, my back to him. Suddenly, his movement stopped. I heard the sound of paper being torn open. For a full 2 minutes, the living room was completely silent. "Sarah." His voice trembled, with obvious heavy breathing. I slowly turned around and looked at him. He was clutching the cream-colored letter tightly in his hand, his eyes bulging, a fine layer of sweat forming on his forehead. You have a great aunt in Texas?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing violently. I pretended to be indifferent, stood up, pulled the letter from his hand, and tossed it casually onto the coffee table. There might be someone like that, probably never even seen her face. I think this is just some scam spam. I continued folding the towels in the basket. Mark lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders with both hands, his fingernails almost digging into my flesh. $5 million. "Sarah, it's clearly printed right here. $5 million. He was panting heavily, his voice shrill. He stared at the letter, a nearly manic gleam flashing in his eyes. At dinner, the atmosphere at the table became extremely strange. Mark voluntarily went to the kitchen and pan-seared 2 excellent ribeye steaks, even opening a bottle of wine he usually wouldn't dare to touch. He even used his knife and fork to cut the beef on my plate into small pieces. "That lawyer Barnes left a phone number, right? We have to call first thing tomorrow to confirm." He shoved a piece of meat into his mouth while staring at my face. "We'll deal with it tomorrow. I still need to pick up your coat from the dry cleaners." I took a sip of wine. I'll get it. I'll get the clothes. He immediately dropped his knife and fork onto the plate with a sharp clatter. "You stay home tomorrow and call that lawyer. If there are any documents to sign, I'll go with you." After dinner, Mark rushed to carry all the plates and glasses into the kitchen and started the dishwasher. I sat on the couch, staring at the TV screen, keeping an eye on the reflection in the glass. He dried his hands, pulled out his phone from his pocket, and quickly walked to the wooden deck in the backyard, sliding the glass door shut with force. I stood up from the couch, crept along the wall to the sliding door, and hid behind the thick blackout curtains. He was on the phone, pacing anxiously on the wooden floor, his right hand scratching the back of his head. "I absolutely can't make it tonight. There's a huge emergency at home," he hissed into the phone. The person on the other end seemed to complain about something. He suddenly lifted his foot and kicked a ceramic flower pot nearby. The pot toppled over, spilling dirt everywhere. "Shut up. You already got the $4,000 necklace. What else do you want? Don't contact me for at least a week." He hung up abruptly, gripping the phone tightly in his hand, took 3 deep breaths, and forced a stiff smile onto his face. He slid the glass door open and came back inside. "Honey, how about we go check out new cars this weekend? That old Honda of yours should have been junked ages ago." He sat down next to me, reaching out to put his arm around my shoulder. I straightened up, dodged his hand, and headed toward the bathroom at the end of the hall.
"I'm tired."
"I'm going to take a shower first." After showering, I lay in bed and heard Mark pacing around the living room downstairs, his footsteps echoing until 2 in the morning. At 6 in the morning, the smell of sizzling bacon drifted up from the kitchen into the bedroom. I pushed open the door and went downstairs. Mark was already dressed, wearing a dark blue tie. He stood at the stove, scooping 2 perfectly fried eggs onto a plate. On the table, there was even a latte with latte art. My laptop sat squarely in the middle of the dining table. "Good morning, future millionaire." He pulled out a chair, gesturing for me to sit. He pointed at the computer screen. "I already checked out that law firm's website. Barnes and Associates. Looks very professional." I verified the phone number too. It matches the one on the letter exactly. I picked up the coffee cup, hiding the smirk on my lips. That fake website took me an hour to set up. "Sarah, it's 9 in the morning now. Texas is already open.
"Call them."
He slid his phone across the table to me, tapping his fingers impatiently on the surface. I set down the coffee cup, picked up his phone, and slowly entered the virtual number I'd applied for last night. Then I hit the speakerphone button. The living room echoed with the dial tone. 2 seconds later, my old phone, tucked in my apron pocket, started buzzing violently. I pressed down hard on the pocket, my palms sweating. Mark stared wide-eyed at the phone's speaker on the table. No answer. I hung up before the 3rd ring. The lawyer might be in court. Mark didn't suspect a thing. He rubbed his hands together excitedly, walked to the counter, and grabbed his car keys. "Try again in half an hour. I'll handle the morning meeting at the office, take the day off, and be back by 1 to help you with those documents." He picked up his briefcase, walked to the door, and pulled it open. The cold morning air rushed into the living room. "Sarah, remember, this money will change our lives. Don't let anyone mess it up." He looked me in the eyes, his tone carrying a harsh warning. The door clicked shut. I pulled out the old phone from my apron pocket. The screen lit up, showing the text messages synced from Mark's cloud. At 2:10 a.m. Kelly had sent the last message. "You think a $4,000 necklace can shut me up? You used my name to cover up your company's shady debts. If I don't get an explanation by noon, I'll come to your office lobby and make a scene." I stared at the message, tapping my fingers lightly on the table. Mark's shady debts. I unplugged the laptop's power cord and found the spare key to his briefcase. I needed to book a taxi for Kelly to go straight to Mark's office building before noon. I grabbed the spare key Mark had left at home. I opened the old phone, launched the Uber app, entered Kelly's apartment address, and set the destination to the main entrance of Mark's company. I used the spare credit card Mark had left at home to pay for the fare. The blue car icon on the screen started moving. The app showed the driver would arrive at Kelly's place in 5 minutes. I slipped on my flats, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. I drove my old Honda and parked it in the paid lot across from Mark's company. Rolling down the window, I stared at the revolving glass doors of the building. The blinds on the 11th floor were tightly shut. That's where Mark's office was. 15 minutes later, a black Toyota sedan pulled up at the building's entrance. Kelly pushed open the door and stepped out. She wore a bright red trench coat and carried a huge black tote bag. Clicking her heels, she strode toward the revolving doors. By all logic, Mark should have been sitting calmly in a meeting room right then. My plan could have sparked a nice commotion in the lobby, but things went off track. Just as Kelly pushed open half of the glass door, Mark burst out of a side door. He wasn't even wearing a suit jacket, and his tie was crooked. He grabbed Kelly's arm and yanked her down the steps. Kelly shook him off and started yelling. Across the street, I couldn't make out the exact words. Mark quickly clamped his hand over her mouth, half pushing, half dragging her into the Starbucks next to the building. I pushed open the Honda door, tugged at my collar, and crossed the crosswalk. I pushed open the glass door of Starbucks. The line for coffee was long. Mark and Kelly were sitting in the booth at the far corner. I walked over to the wooden shelves behind them, picked up a bag of Colombian dark roast beans, and pretended to read the ingredient list on the packaging. The bag rustled in my hands. Are you crazy? You actually called a car to come to my office. Mark's voice was low, his fist pounding hard on the wooden table. The coffee cup on the table jolted, and brown liquid splashed onto the napkin. You think a $4,000 cheap necklace can shut me up? Kelly slammed the huge black tote bag onto Mark's lap. The zipper wasn't fully closed, and a few financial documents with red stamps peeked out. All the company's fake bills are in here. You need to give me $30,000 in cash today. Otherwise, I'm going straight upstairs to see your finance director. Kelly's voice was a bit sharp, making an elderly woman at the next table turn her head. Mark immediately hunched his shoulders, using his body to block Kelly's face. He leaned back against the sofa, breathing heavily. He ran his hand through his hair, messing up his once neat style. I don't have $30,000 in cash on hand. All the money at home is in the joint account, and Sarah can see any movement. Sweat beaded on Mark's forehead. He pulled out a napkin and wiped his brow vigorously. Don't use your wife as an excuse. You just said yesterday that she's about to inherit $5 million. You can't even scrape together $30,000? Kelly sneered, stood up, and grabbed her tote bag to leave.
Wait.
Mark grabbed the hem of her trench coat. I'll do it. I'll get you the $30,000 by this afternoon. And I'll cover the company's $20,000 shortfall today, too. Leave the bills with me. Kelly sat back down. 3 o'clock this afternoon, cash deal. 1 minute late, and I'm going upstairs. I put down the bag of coffee beans, turned, and pushed open the glass door to leave Starbucks. I drove home. I turned on that old phone and logged into the email for Barnes & Associates law firm. I sent a long email in pure English to my everyday inbox. I pasted a fake gold law firm logo at the top. The content of the email was very simple. The $5 million trust fund was ready to enter the payment process. The prerequisite was that the heir must, within 48 hours, wire $50,000 to a designated federal tax escrow account for interstate asset transfer stamp duty and legal fees. I hit send and marked the email as red flag urgent. At 1 p.m, Mark pushed open the front door. His face was as pale as paper. He carried a black plastic bag with 2 stale convenience store sandwiches. Without even changing his shoes, he walked straight across the carpet into the kitchen. He turned on the faucet and gulped down a few mouthfuls of tap water. Sarah, something's wrong. He gripped the edge of the stainless steel sink, staring at me intently. I sat at the dining table and turned my laptop screen toward him. Something is wrong. The lawyer just sent an email. Come take a look. Mark rushed over in 3 quick steps, planted his hands on the table, and pressed his face almost against the screen. His eyes darted left and right rapidly, reading the email. $50,000 in fees? He straightened up abruptly, his voice trembling. And it has to be wired within 48 hours.
Yes.
If that $50,000 isn't paid on time, the inheritance process will be frozen indefinitely, or even directly reclaimed by the local court. I crossed my arms over my chest. We have less than $8,000 in our joint account. All my fixed deposits haven't matured yet, and withdrawing them would cost most of the penalty. We simply don't have that money. Mark paced back and forth in the living room. He kicked a robot vacuum cleaner at the edge of the carpet. The vacuum let out a red warning light and spun wildly in the corner. We absolutely cannot let that $5 million slip away, he shouted, pointing at the ceiling. That money will solve all my problems right now. He pulled out his phone, fingers tapping frantically on the screen. Mark, what problems do you have? I stared at his back and asked. He froze, turned around, his face twitching as he forced an extremely ugly smile. I just had an investment project that lost some money. Don't worry, I'll handle the $50,000. I promised to deposit it into the lawyer's account by noon tomorrow. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out the door again. I opened my computer and logged into our joint account's online banking. The balance hadn't changed at all. He really didn't dare touch that money. 2 hours later, I opened the hidden surveillance software on my computer. It was connected to the dash cam in his Ford pickup. I stared at the screen. He first went back to his mother's house. The car parked on the lawn outside. 20 minutes later, he stormed out, hands empty. He kicked the pickup's tire hard. Then he sat in the car and made over a dozen calls. I could hear his humble begging for money through the car's interior microphone. Old buddy, help me out. I just need to borrow $20,000. I'll pay you back $30,000 with interest next month. Hello? Hello? He threw his phone onto the passenger seat. Desperate, he restarted the engine. The screen showed him parking at a fast cash loan company on the outskirts of town, its red neon sign flashing. He got out holding a thick stack of documents. Those were the second mortgage papers for the house, along with his company's stock option certificates. He went to a pawn shop on another street. He slapped his favorite Rolex Submariner, Hulk, watch onto the glass counter and gestured intensely with the owner. At 6 p.m, Mark came home reeking of alcohol. He pulled a bank check from the inside pocket of his suit jacket and slammed it onto the dining table. $50,000. I borrowed it. His eyes were bloodshot, and he grinned exaggeratedly, showing his teeth. I got it from a friend. Interest-free loan. I looked at the check stamped with the bank seal. This $50,000, plus the $30,000 he was supposed to give Kelly this afternoon, and the $20,000 to plug the hole in his company. In just one afternoon, Mark had saddled himself with a total of $100,000 in short-term, high-interest debt out of thin air. You're amazing. I put the check into the drawer and turned the key to lock it. I'll go to the bank first thing tomorrow and wire this money to Barnes the lawyer. He slumped onto the sofa, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. Once the $5 million comes in, we'll get a bigger house. I'm buying a brand new Porsche. I walked to the kitchen and pulled the return department store bill from my pocket. The edges of the bill were already frayed. I lit a corner of the bill with a lighter and tossed it into the stainless steel sink. The yellow flames quickly consumed Kelly's name and the amount for that $4,000 necklace. A pile of black ash remained at the bottom of the sink. I turned on the faucet, and the cold water washed the ash completely down the drain. At 8 a.m, I opened the top drawer of the entryway cabinet. I laid the $50,000 bank check flat at the bottom of the drawer. I turned the lock and heard the metal latch click into the wood. I tossed the small brass key into the glass fruit bowl on the side, letting it rest right next to 2 green apples. I grabbed my car keys and pushed open the front door. The cold wind hit my face. I got into my old Honda, pulled out of the driveway, and parked in the corner of a gas station 2 blocks away. I bought a large black coffee and returned to the driver's seat. I mounted my phone on the dashboard holder and opened 2 apps on the screen. The left side of the screen showed the hidden surveillance feed from the living room. The right side was connected to the dashcam and interior microphone of Mark's Ford pickup. Mark came down from the second floor. He was wearing the same dark gray suit from yesterday. He walked to the entryway, bent down to put on his leather shoes. He looked up, his eyes fixed on the small brass key in the glass fruit bowl. He turned his head, glanced around. He reached out, grabbed the key, and inserted it into the lock of the drawer. He pulled open the drawer, stuffed the bank check into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He locked the drawer again and tossed the key back into the fruit bowl. He strode quickly out the gate. The sound of the pickup truck's engine came through the microphone into my phone. I followed the GPS red dot of the pickup truck. The red stopped at the entrance of Chase Bank in downtown. He stayed inside the bank for a full 40 minutes. The red moved again, heading toward the industrial park in the East End. The pickup truck pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned drive-in movie theater. The area was overgrown with weeds half a meter tall, the ground pitted, and filled with muddy water left from last night's rain. A silver Chevrolet sedan was parked next to the rusted projector stand. Kelly leaned against the car door, wearing a black hoodie, hands shoved in her pockets. Mark pushed open his door and walked over. He pulled a thick yellow manila envelope from the inside of his suit jacket. He tore open the seal and took out a large stack of $100 bills bound with white bank straps. $30,000 in cash. Take it. Give me all the documents. Mark held the money out to Kelly. Kelly didn't reach for it. The back door of the Chevrolet suddenly kicked open. A burly man in a black leather jacket, his face covered in stubble, stepped out. He was over 6'3", with large tattoos covering his neck and arms. Mark took a big step back, still gripping the stack of bills. The big man strode forward, grabbed Mark's suit tie with his left hand, and snatched the yellow manila envelope with his right, taking the cash from Mark's hands as well. Give me back the money. There's $50,000 in there. I need $20,000 to cover the company's shortfall. Mark shouted, flailing his arms to grab the envelope. The big man raised his arm and shoved Mark hard in the chest. Mark lost his balance, his feet tangling, and he fell heavily onto the ground littered with gravel and muddy water. His suit pants tore, his knees and palms smeared with black mud. Kelly crouched down, pulled the black tote bag full of fake bills from her pocket, unzipped it, and waved it in front of Mark's face. I'm taking all $50,000. Consider it compensation for my emotional distress. Kelly pointed at Mark's nose. If you dare call the cops or go to the company's finance department, I'll paste these documents on your office glass door tomorrow. You used my name to scam a loan. Get ready for jail. The big man stuffed the manila envelope inside his leather jacket and opened the Chevrolet's door. Kelly slid into the passenger seat. The car's exhaust pipe belched black smoke. The tires spun for a few seconds in the mud, and then they sped off. Mark sat in the puddle. He pounded the ground with both fists. Gravel cut into his palms. He got up, opened the pickup truck door, and slumped over the steering wheel, his shoulders heaving violently. I finished the last sip of black coffee from my cup. I crushed the paper cup, pushed open my car door, and tossed it into the gas station trash can. I started my Honda and drove back home along the same route. I sat on the living room couch. I took out a cable, connected my phone to the big TV on the wall. The TV screen looped the dashcam footage of Mark struggling in the mud and being shoved down. The brass handle of the front door turned. Mark pushed the door open and walked in. His leather shoes left a trail of black mud prints on the wool carpet. One button was missing from his suit jacket. His tie hung crookedly around his neck, dripping dirty water. He looked up, his eyes fixed on the big TV on the wall. On the screen, the tattooed big man shoved him to the ground. The scene played over and over. His mouth fell open, his Adam's apple bobbed up and down, but no sound came out. I leaned back against the couch cushion, picked up the remote, and pressed pause. The frame froze on the moment Kelly pointed the bills at his nose. Did you go to the bank to wire the money? I pointed at the TV screen, looking into his eyes. Does this guy in the leather jacket also work part-time as a paralegal at Barnes' law firm? Mark lunged toward the TV. He reached for the power cord behind it. The plug was stuck tight, and he pulled so hard he fell backward, his back slamming into the wooden edge of the coffee table. You followed me. You put a camera in my car. He scrambled up from the carpet, pointing at my face and shouting. Spit flew into the air. I stood up, grabbed an empty glass water cup from the coffee table, and smashed it on the floor by his feet. Glass shards flew everywhere, hitting his leather shoes. Mark flinched back a big step, clamping his mouth shut. I'll ask you once, where did that $50,000 go? I took a step forward, my shoe soles crunching on the broken glass. Mark backed against the wall, slowly sliding down until he crouched on the floor. He buried his head in his hands, his mud-caked fingers gripping his hair tightly. Gone. All the money is gone. He buried his face in his knees, his voice trembling uncontrollably. That woman's name is Kelly. I gave her the necklace. She blackmailed me with the fake bill. They took all $50,000. He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot, snot running down to the edge of his lips. Sarah, it's completely over. The company will audit the accounts at 2 this afternoon. I can't cover the $20,000 shortfall. They'll definitely sue me. Suddenly, he lunged at me, grabbing my calves tightly with both hands, smearing mud on my jeans.
Help me.
Use the house as collateral, or borrow $20,000 from your parents. Just fill the company's hole, and we'll get that $5 million inheritance back. I'll pay her back with interest. I yanked my leg free. He rolled over on the carpet. The house was already used for a second mortgage yesterday. Did you really think I couldn't find the records? I pulled the Zillow property printout from my pocket and threw it in his face. The title to this house was secretly changed to your mother's name a while ago. What makes you think I'd use my parents' retirement savings to save you? Mark froze. The printout slid off his nose and landed on the carpet. I was planning to change it back in a few days. He stammered, his eyes darting around. He fumbled frantically, pulling his phone from his pants pocket and tapping the screen wildly. He pressed the speaker button.
Mom.
Give me $20,000 in cash. Transfer it to my account right now. He shouted into the phone. His mother's sharp voice came through. $20,000? I barely have money for groceries. You just took the deed to get a loan yesterday. What kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into?
Click.
The call ended. Mark threw his phone onto the carpet. The screen shattered into several pieces. I walked to the entryway, grabbed my car keys and trench coat. Where are you going? He pushed himself up from the carpet, spreading his arms to block me. To the police station. I pushed open the front door, and the cold wind rushed into the living room. You were robbed of $50,000. As your wife, I should go with you to file a report. Let the police catch Kelly and that big guy, and have them investigate that fake bill. Mark's eyes widened instantly. He rushed over, grabbed the wooden door handle, and slammed it shut with a loud bang. We absolutely cannot call the police. He leaned his back against the door, panting heavily. Once the police file a case, the company's auditors will immediately find out about my fake accounting. Oh, so you're afraid of going to jail. I stepped back 2 paces, staring at his mud-stained pants. Then figure out how to cover that $20,000 yourself. You have 3 hours until 2 o'clock. Mark pushed himself up from the carpet. He walked into the first-floor bathroom. The faucet ran with a gushing sound. 10 minutes later, he came out wearing a clean, spare, dark blue suit. He tossed his broken phone into the kitchen trash can and dug an old backup phone from the bottom drawer of his desk. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out the door. The garage door rolled up and then down. I sat on the couch, watching the red of the truck's location move again on my phone screen. The red traveled along the highway and finally stopped at the underground parking lot of the office building downtown. His voice came through the phone speaker as he connected via car Bluetooth.
David, do-me a favor.
Mark's voice trembled, accompanied by rapid breaths. Log into the internal approval system right now. Pull up that $20,000 purchase order from last month. Change the final approver's name to the new intern, Tom. Yeah, and change the timestamp to the 5th of last month. Do it now, and keep your mouth shut. Mark, this completely violates security protocols. The voice on the other end sounded hesitant. Do it now, I'm telling you. I'll take full responsibility for any problems. Mark yelled, slamming his fist on the steering wheel, causing the horn to let out a short screech. Send me the confirmation screen when you're done. The call ended. I unplugged my phone charger. I walked to the study and opened the Canon printer. I pulled out the paper tray and inserted a few sheets of high-quality photo paper. I placed the original return receipt for the $4,000 Van Cleef and Arpels necklace flat on the scanner glass. I closed the lid. The machine hummed as it worked. A minute later, A crystal-clear, high-definition color copy came out of the tray. The name and amount were perfectly clear. Then I took out a black metal USB drive. I plugged it into the computer's USB port and dragged the recording file of Mark's call with David into it. I renamed the file The Truth About 20,000. I placed the color bill and the USB drive into a plain white craft paper envelope with no markings. I picked up the glue, coated the envelope flap, and pressed it firmly for a full 30 seconds to ensure it was completely sealed. I changed into a long black trench coat, put on a baseball cap, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. I drove my Honda and parked on the second level of the underground garage across from Mark's company. The electronic clock on the wall showed 12:30 p.m. At this time, everyone on the 11th floor office was downstairs in the cafeteria, lining up for lunch. I took the freight elevator to the 11th floor. The glass door at the reception area was open. The security guard's seat was empty, with a half-eaten vegetable salad on the desk and a metal fork still stuck in a tomato. I pulled out the family visitor card Mark had given me before and swiped it over the sensor on the turnstile. The green light came on, and the transparent barrier slid open to both sides. I walked straight toward the employee workstation area. My footsteps made no sound on the gray carpet. I searched for the name on the acrylic nameplates on the desks. At the third row, the seat closest to the window had the name Tom on it. On the desk were a few plastic anime figurines and a white mug with a university logo. There was still half a cup of cold coffee in the mug. I placed the white craft paper envelope flat in the center of Tom's black keyboard. I picked up a red marker from the desk and wrote a bold line on the envelope. Audit meeting at 2 p.m. Take this to save your job. I put down the marker, turned, and left the workstation area. I walked into the guest elevator in the lobby and pressed the button for the first floor. At 1:50 p.m., I sat in the coffee area on the first floor lobby. I ordered a lemonade with extra ice. My seat was directly facing the main elevators on the first floor, and through the glass atrium above, I could see the suspended, transparent conference room on the 11th floor. All the ceiling lights in the conference room were on. Mark stood at the front of the long conference table, holding a green laser pointer. 6 company executives filed in one by one and sat down in the black leather chairs. The young man named Tom walked in last. He wore a gray suit that was clearly one size too big, clutching the hem of his jacket tightly. He made no move, just stood with his head down in the corner closest to the door. The second hand on the wall clock ticked. The hand stopped at exactly 2 o'clock. Mark clicked the laser pointer. The projection screen at the front of the conference room came down, displaying a complex financial report. Mark pointed the green laser at a red data point in the bottom right corner of the report. He turned his head, extended his right hand, and pointed at Tom in the corner. His mouth moved rapidly. Through 2 layers of glass, I couldn't hear his voice. I could only clearly see the stern expression on his face. He pointed at the conference room door and made a shooing motion. Tom jerked his head up. His shoulders heaved violently. Tom strode to the conference table. He pulled the white craft paper envelope from his jacket pocket. He tore open the seal and slapped the color copy of the necklace bill onto the center of the table. The executives on both sides leaned in, staring at the paper. Tom picked up the black metal USB drive and plugged it directly into the side of the laptop connected to the projector. He clicked the mouse a few times. The conference room speakers must have been turned up to maximum. Even on the first floor lobby, I could faintly hear the vibrations coming from the ceiling. Mark's shouting on the phone echoed throughout the entire first floor lobby. Mark's hands froze in midair. The laser pointer dropped from his hand, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. He turned around, eyes wide, staring at the computer screen. The glass sliding door of the conference room was pushed open abruptly. The HR director strode in, followed closely by 2 burly building security guards in black uniforms. The director walked up to Mark and pointed toward the door. Mark shook his head frantically, waving his hands wildly in front of his chest. He grabbed the director's arm, saying something nonstop. Without hesitation, the director reached out and ripped the blue employee badge from Mark's neck. The nylon lanyard snapped, and the plastic card fell onto the carpet. The 2 security guards stepped forward, one on each side, grabbing Mark's arms. They forcefully dragged Mark toward the door. Mark kicked his legs against the carpet, leaning backward. His leather shoe knocked over a nearby office chair, which crashed into the glass wall. The guards escorted him into the hallway and shoved him directly into the leftmost service elevator. The elevator doors closed. The numbers above the elevator started from 11 and rapidly descended. 10, 9, 8, 7. I picked up the glass of lemonade with extra ice from the table, stood up, and walked to the marble floor in front of the main elevator exit.
Ding. A crisp sound.
The first-floor elevator doors slid open to both sides. 2 security guards escorted Mark out. His spare suit was completely wrinkled. His tie was crooked over his shoulder, and the top button of his shirt had popped off. The guard shoved him hard, and Mark tripped over the metal track at the elevator entrance, pitching forward. He landed on his knees with a heavy thud on the polished marble floor of the lobby, the dull sound of flesh hitting stone echoing. I stood 2 steps away from him. Mark looked up. A large red bruise had formed on his forehead. He stared at me, his eyes darting left and right. Sarah. He reached out one hand, trying to grab the hem of my trench coat. His fingers brushed against the edge of the fabric. I turned my wrist downward. A full glass of ice water poured over his head. Ice cubes hit his nose bridge and slid down his collar into his shirt. A brown lemon slice stuck to his cheek. Water dripped from his chin onto the floor. He shivered violently, unable to get up, his hands pressed against the ground. I tossed the empty glass into the nearby metal trash can. I turned and walked toward the revolving glass door, pushed it open, and stepped into the sunlight outside. I went home and took off my black trench coat, one corner damp from the cold water. I hung it on the metal coat rack in the entryway. The living room was eerily quiet. The second hand on the wall clock ticked steadily. At 4:30 p.m., a clatter of footsteps came from outside. The brass handle of the front door twisted violently. Mark pushed the door open and stumbled into the entryway like a pile of mud. His suit jacket was completely wrinkled and covered in dust from the first-floor lobby. One of his shoes had fallen off on the steps. He didn't even close the door, crawling into the living room on all fours. He grabbed the edge of the sofa to stand up. His hair was plastered to his forehead, water dripping from the tip of his nose. "Sarah, get the phone." He gasped for breath, his voice hoarse like sandpaper scraping against a wall. "Call Barnes' lawyer right now." I sat on a single sofa, my hands resting flat on my knees. "I need that $5 million. He lunged forward, gripping the edge of the coffee table with both hands. The glass fruit bowl on the table wobbled. 2 green apples rolled onto the carpet. "If that $5 million comes in today, I can pay off the loan shark company right away. I can even hire the best lawyer to fight the company in court." I bent down and pulled an HDMI cable from the bottom drawer of the coffee table. I plugged one end into my laptop and the other into the large TV on the wall. I pressed the power button on the TV remote. The screen flickered and lit up with a blue glow. The screen displayed the full-screen interface of my computer browser. In the center was the web page for Barnes & Associates law firm. It featured a gold-embossed scale logo and photos of a few foreign men in black suits. Yes, that's it. Mark trembled with excitement. He reached out a muddy hand, pointing at the consultation phone number on the TV screen. "Call this number. Call it now." I didn't pick up my phone. I placed my hand on the laptop's touchpad. I clicked on the second tab at the top of the browser. It was the back-end management interface of the domain registrar. Black text on a white background, filled with dense English code and settings. Mark's eyes widened. He stared intently at the English on the screen. I moved the cursor. I found the line for the Barnes Law Firm URL. The cursor moved right, stopping on a red trash can icon. Next to the icon, it read Delete Domain. I clicked the left mouse button. A white confirmation warning box popped up in the center of the screen. "What are you doing?" Mark shouted. He tried to come around the coffee table to grab my computer. I pressed the enter key before he could. The interface refreshed instantly. The domain's status changed to a gray canceled. I switched back to the first tab and pressed the F5 key to refresh. The elaborate web page on the TV vanished instantly. In its place was a glaring white background. In the top left corner of the screen, there was only a cold, black line of small text, Error 404, page not found. Mark stood frozen. His outstretched hand hung in midair. He immediately pulled the backup phone from his pants pocket. His fingers frantically tapped the screen, entering the phone number from the webpage. He pressed the speaker button. From the speaker came only a mechanical voice. The number you dialed is not in service. He hung up. He dialed again. Still not in service. He threw the phone onto the sofa cushion. The web server is down. The lawyer's phone is down too. I opened the coffee table drawer. I pulled out a white receipt, the size of a supermarket slip. I laid the receipt flat on the glass tabletop and pushed it toward him.
$12.
I pointed to the amount at the bottom of the receipt. This $12 was all I needed to buy that one virtual domain name online yesterday morning. I pulled out another crumpled receipt from a print shop. $3. That cream-colored letter paper sealed with wax. It cost $3 to print at the shop 3 blocks away. The seal was made entirely from scraps cut off your old file folders. Mark lowered his head, staring hard at those 2 slips of paper. His breathing came to a complete halt. Then, the $50,000 processing fee? His Adam's apple bobbed violently as he stammered out the words. There was no lawyer at all, no inheritance procedures whatsoever. I opened my phone and pulled up the bank app showing the deposit record. The screen displayed a full balance of $50,000. That cashier's check was deposited in full into a personal account I opened separately. Mark's legs gave out, and he dropped heavily to his knees on the carpet. His kneecaps hit the wooden floor with a dull, sharp thud. You used the joint account to swipe $4,000 on a necklace for Kelly. You used Kelly's identity to fraudulently take out a loan. You embezzled $20,000 from the company and cooked the books. You borrowed $100,000 from a loan shark. I stood up, looking down at him. You did all of this with your own hands. For that $5 million that never existed. Mark's lips trembled violently. He braced himself with his hands on the carpet. You lost a job paying $120,000 a year. You're saddled with $100,000 in loan shark debt. And you've mortgaged the house. I picked up the 2 receipts from the table, tore them into shreds, and scattered them over his head. Mark let out a guttural roar like a wild animal. He slammed both fists hard against the wooden edge of the coffee table. The glass top shook violently, and an empty water cup fell onto the carpet, rolling far away. He grabbed his own hair with both hands and yanked downward. I walked to the entryway. A black suitcase stood there. I had packed all my clothes in it that morning. There's a divorce agreement on the bottom shelf of the coffee table. I've already signed it. I pulled up the suitcase handle. The wheels rumbled across the floor. The loan shark company will come to take the house tomorrow. The title to this house is now in your mother's name. They'll go straight to her to collect the debt. Where are you going? He was still on his knees, whipping his head around. His eyes were bloodshot, and snot and saliva mixed together, dripping onto his collar. I pushed open the front door. The cold evening wind swept into the living room. He scrambled on all fours toward the door. Sarah, please. Take out that $50,000 and help me. Those debt collectors will definitely break my legs. He reached out a muddy hand to grab my trench coat. I sidestepped to avoid his grasp. The agreement clearly states that you, in your eagerness to pocket the $5 million, voluntarily signed away your right to claim that $50,000. I walked down the steps, pulling the suitcase toward the Honda parked in the driveway. I opened the trunk, shoved the suitcase inside, and slammed the door shut. Mark, with one bare foot, stood on the gravel-covered driveway. I got into the driver's seat, locked the door, and started the engine. He threw himself onto the hood of the car, pounding both hands against the windshield. Open the door. Sarah, open the door. He screamed, his face completely twisted, saliva spraying onto the windshield. I shifted into reverse. The car slowly backed up. He lost his balance, slid off the hood, and landed hard on the gravel. I turned the steering wheel and pressed the gas. The car smoothly pulled onto the street. In the rearview mirror, he sat alone in the middle of the empty driveway, clutching his hair. burying his head deep into his knees. Behind him, the 4-bedroom house stood with its front door wide open, pitch black inside. At 7 o'clock the next morning, I sat in the living room of my newly rented apartment downtown. I popped a black coffee capsule into the machine and pressed the button. Dark brown coffee dripped into a white mug. I picked up the cup, walked to the desk by the floor-to-ceiling window, pulled out the wooden chair, and sat down. I flipped open my laptop screen. I double-clicked the monitoring software icon on the desktop. The screen instantly split into 2 halves. On the left, a full view of Mark's living room. On the right, the Ring smart doorbell feed from outside the front door. Mark lay on the living room carpet. He was still wearing the same spare suit from yesterday, now covered in mud. He curled up into a ball, clutching tightly the old phone with its shattered screen. The coffee table was littered with the shredded receipt scraps I had torn up yesterday. On the road outside the front door, a silver Lexus sedan pulled up at the edge of the lawn. The door opened, and Mark's mother stepped out in a burgundy cashmere coat. She clutched a black handbag tightly, walked quickly up the gravel driveway in high heels. She reached the front door and pressed the doorbell hard. The chime echoed through the living room. Mark jolted awake from the carpet. He rubbed his eyes and crawled toward the entrance on all fours. He twisted the brass lock on the front door and yanked it open. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, and he swallowed hard. Mark's mother shoved him aside and strode into the living room. She slammed her black leather bag onto the coffee table, rattling 2 glass cups. She pulled out a thick stack of white envelopes from her bag and hurled them into Mark's face. The edges of the envelopes scraped his chin before scattering onto the carpet. "What the hell have you done?" She screamed, pointing at the letters strewn across the floor. "Last night, the collection agency plastered demand notices on my front door. They said you owe $100,000. They even called my card buddies' homes." Mark scrambled to his knees, frantically picking up the letters. His hands trembled as he tore open one of the envelopes. "Mom, let me explain. I can get the money back soon." He clutched the hem of her cashmere coat. "Lend me your pension, or take out a mortgage on your house to cover this debt. I'll pay you back double later." Mark's mother kicked him in the knee. He fell backward, hitting the carpet hard. "You dare mention my house? You've been fired. The whole neighborhood group chat is buzzing with the video of you being thrown out of the building by security for cooking the books." She jabbed a finger at his nose. "Don't think you're getting a single cent from me. Call those loan sharks right now and tell them your debt has nothing to do with me." A dull screech of brakes came from outside the front door. I glanced at the right side of my computer screen. A white van with bold black lettering reading, "Speed Asset Liquidation," pulled into the driveway. 3 burly men in reflective vests jumped out. The bald man in front carried a metal clipboard. The other 2 held thick metal chains and a large yellow padlock. The bald man stepped up to the porch and pounded on the open door. "Mark Johnson and Linda Johnson." His voice was gruff and loud. Mark flinched and shrank back to the edge of the sofa. Mark's mother turned around and clicked her heels toward the entrance.
"I'm Linda."
"What are you doing here? I'm warning you. Get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police." The bald man showed no fear. He sneered, flipped open his clipboard, and pulled out a document stamped with a red official seal. He held it up to Mark's mother's face. "Ms. Linda, take a good look. This is the second mortgage contract for this house. The borrower is Mark Johnson. The property owner, which is you, Linda Johnson, signed as the guarantor right here." He tapped the signature line with his thick finger. Mark's mother's eyes went wide. She snatched the paper and stared at the signature. "I never signed this. It's all forged." She whipped around, glaring at Mark, who was cowering in the corner of the sofa. "You stole my seal? You forged my signature to mortgage this house?" Mark covered his face with both hands and shook his head frantically. "Mom, I was just a few thousand short to balance the books. I had no choice. Half of this house is in my name anyway. I was just using it early." Mark's mother gasped for air, her chest heaving. She looked around wildly, then suddenly rushed to the fireplace and grabbed a metal poker. "You absolute con artist. You'd even steal your own mother's retirement home." She slammed the poker against the wall, gouging a hole in it. She dropped the metal rod and stormed into the bedroom. The bald man ignored their quarrel. He waved his hand. The other two men walked into the living room and began sweeping throw pillows from the sofa and knickknacks from the coffee table into large black plastic bags. The debt is overdue. We are now legally seizing this property and all liquid assets inside. The bald man tucked the document back into his clipboard. You have two options. 1. Hand over a cashier's check for $100,000 right now. 2. Get the hell out of this house immediately. Mark scrambled up and rushed to the bald man. Please, just give me 3 more days. I'll go to Kelly and get back the $50,000 she owes me. I swear I can pay it off. The man shoved Mark aside. Mark slammed into the wall, and a landscape painting fell off, hitting his shoulder. The glass frame shattered on the floor. The bedroom door flew open. Mark's mother dragged out 2 giant black trash bags. She hauled them to the entrance and hurled them out the door. The bags split open on the steps, spilling Mark's few remaining old shirts, a mud-stained tie, and his toothbrush onto the lawn. This house is yours now. Mark's mother adjusted the collar of her cashmere coat, pulled the spare key to the house from her bag, and tossed it onto the bald man's iron clipboard. This man has no blood relation to me. From today on, every penny he owes, you go directly to him to collect. If any of you dare to stick a payment notice on my door again, I'll sue you directly. She clicked her heels, striding across the lawn without looking back. She opened the door of her Lexus sedan and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared, and the silver car reversed out of the driveway, quickly disappearing at the end of the street. Mark ran out the front door barefoot.
Mom.
Don't leave me.
Mom.
He stood at the edge of the lawn, his arms flailing uselessly. 2 burly men wrapped thick metal chains tightly around the handles of the gate. With a loud clang, a large yellow padlock clicked shut. The bald man tore off a seal stamped with assets seized, no entry, and slapped it onto the center of the door panel. The 3 men walked back to the van. The door closed. The van spewed a puff of exhaust and drove away. Mark turned around, staring blankly at the sealed gate. His pride and joy, the 4-bedroom house he had schemed to transfer into his mother's name, was now locked up with chains. He slowly walked down the steps, bent over, and picked up the mud-stained tie, clutching it tightly in his hand. Holding the torn black plastic bag, he plopped down on the cold curb. A cold wind blew, sweeping a few withered leaves across the lawn. He buried his face in his arms, his shoulders shaking irregularly. I finished the last sip of black coffee in my cup. Only a ring of brown residue remained at the bottom. I moved the mouse cursor to the top right corner of the screen. I clicked the Logout Device button in the surveillance software's backend. Confirm disconnection of all connections and deletion of records. A warning box popped up in the center of the screen. I pressed the Enter key to confirm. The screen went black instantly, and the image vanished completely. I closed my laptop. I walked to the entrance, put on a pair of brand new white sneakers. I grabbed my car keys and pushed open the door of my apartment. The sunlight outside was bright and clear, without a trace of gloom.